Mr. Dwayne Stovall. He was a candidate for U.S. Senator in the primary this year, running against our incumbent, John Cornyn. Dwayne's a native Texan. He was born in Baytown. He claims to have lived there all his life, except for a couple of years when he was in Alaska. He graduated from West Rusk High School in New London, Texas. He attended Kilgore Junior College and Southwest Texas State University. He started his working career during his junior year at Texas State in an operations position at the Arco refinery in Pasadena, where he worked shift work for over 13 years. In 1996, he started a company called Diamond K Equipment, and a year later he left the refinery to run his business on a full-time basis. Diamond K specializes in bridge construction, building bridges all over the state of Texas, primarily for the TxDOT. I wish you'd build the one here in Woodlands that we've been stuck in for years. In 2011, he branched off into, Diamond K branched off into admissions testing in the oil fields. Dwayne is married to his high school sweetheart, and they have 3 wonderful children. So help me welcome Dwayne Stovall.
Thank you. If you're sitting in the back and you want to come up closer so you can throw things, come down. Because the whole basis of what we're going to talk about tonight is going to change the whole. Who are in the legal profession? Just one? I bet you're not going to go against what I'm saying too much.
I have my whistle.
That's okay. Let it fly. I did run against John Cornyn. Anybody that was paying attention to that race, we pulled 11% of Texas on about $70,000. So I did more interviews after the primary than I did prior, and I tore them all up. Where were you at 6 months ago? Very tough. I had an extremely high retainage rate, and when I say retainage rate, the people I spoke with stuck with me. I spoke to around 14,000, 15,000 people over the course of a year, and it turned into about 140,000 plus Texans. You can't do anything about the fact that only 9% of conservatives showed up to vote. And Democrats are worse, only 4% of them showed up to vote. So hopefully we'll get more of us out there in November and maybe change a few things, especially at the state level. Before I start explaining what I came here for, I'm going to tell you, Keep Texas Free is an initiative I started in January, and it came out of the year I spent on the road campaigning. Because what I learned about all of us as Texans, the people that live here, whether you're born here or not, don't care. If you're here in Texas, you're a citizen of Texas. I learned a lot about how much we don't know about the Constitution. And it worries me a lot. And there's some significant things going on that most conservatives don't realize is going on. And I'm here to either upset you a lot or have a light come on in your head so that you can understand what I'm talking about before I leave. Started this in January. I hope if I turn this on. Keep Texas Free, the home base for Keep Texas Free is a website called Get Off My State. We were going to call it Keep My State Free, but it's just too simple, too easy, too fluffy. Get Off My State has a lot more of what I intend to get across in the time I spend traveling around the state. This is what we use. Everybody likes the Gadsden flag. You know, everybody's got their Gadsden flag. Don't tread on me. If you're a grammar specialist or an English major, don't worry about that you've been tread on. We know it's trodden upon. But for messaging, this works. And I hate to say it, most of the people out there don't realize that it's incorrect. But you've been tread on, now what? The fact is, the federal, now national government has had a boot on our throats for over 100 years. And we all run around pretending we're free and we're fighting for our freedom. The fact is, we're completely in servitude at the moment. We're not bound by chains, but we are giving our sanction to ever more chains of debt, future responsibility and liabilities for ourselves and our children. We all know the deal. Y'all put up your no more big government, big taxes, big spending. That's the core of how they control us. So, before I start, how many in the room are ready for the Supreme Court to get off their duff and finally rule in marriage that marriage between one man and one woman?
No, we already decided that.
Okay. Okay.
That's a trick.
That's everybody but 2 people. Now, someone take out the Constitution and show me the Constitution where they have the authority to rule over marriage.
They don't, 10th Amendment.
They don't. And that's kind of the core of the issue conservatives have today. We don't really, truly want limited government. But there's a reason. We think we do, but there's a reason why we don't. Question, do we live in the United States of America in the free and independent state of Texas? Are we supposed to?
We're supposed to.
Yes. Well, I'm going to ask this question, and you ponder this for a minute and see if you've ever been asked this before. Or do we live in the United States, singular, of America, in the county of Texas?
Yeah, that's close to it.
Is there a single state in the entire union that manages their own affairs? No. I can throw things at you right now. And by the way, this is going to be like a fire hose of information for the next 45 minutes or so. So if something just gets by you, raise your hand. There's not enough of us in here to worry about. We'll ask questions. That's good. In the state of Texas, if you use the 82nd legislature, 82nd session, which was prior, not this past one, but the one we have numbers on, anybody got an idea of how much we took in revenue in the state of Texas? What we paid in, our portion. It's about $82 billion. Any idea what we spent?
200.
195 billion plus. How does that work? We're open for business, remember?
Block grants.
Block grants. That is money that was taken from us before we ever saw it in the form of income tax or fuel tax or any other federal tax you want to throw out there. And it's the money that the federal government takes, which is now a national government, it's not federal anymore. But it takes it and it dangles it back to the states. And it says, here, you can have a little bit of this money back, but wait a minute, you can't feed your children fried chicken at school. Wait a minute, you're going to have this water pressure at your shower head. This is how much water you're going to have in your toilet bowl. This is what speed you're going to drive. And by the way, you're too stupid not to wear a seatbelt. You got to be told to wear a seatbelt. So that's the relationship we have with the federal government. So when your state representatives, and I tear them all up, if anybody's with the legislature, just speak up because I single them out. I've been going to the state legislature in Austin for the last 14 years, 15 years. In the beginning, it was because of my business. I was there every month for the bid lettings. After a little while, you get bored with that. You go down to the Capitol and you start kind of figuring out how they handle our money. Well, folks, we're not represented by those who are managing the affairs of Texans. We're represented by people who are trying to figure out how to get as much money back from the federal government as they can to offset how much we're in debt and how much we spend more than we take in. And they agree to every single mandate that comes out of the federal government. And they tell you, boy, I don't like it. But they do it anyway. So when we say no more big taxes, no more big spending, no more big government, we've got to understand that this is 50 states, and there's not a single state that doesn't have the same relationship with the federal government, and of all the states, we are the best of the worst.
Yeah.
It's true. Oh, one more little piece of data you might want to throw out there. In the last 10 years, the population in Texas has grown about 20+%, right around 20, a little over. Any ideas on how much our debt has grown in that same 10-year period? 150% plus. We're over $40 billion in debt in the state of Texas. 75% plus of that belongs to municipalities and school districts. I sit on the school board over at Tarkington Independent School District. We deal with this all the time. It is scary, the path that we're on. And they'll come in and tell us, I tear up my state representative, they'll come in and say, boy, sales taxes are up, we're booming in Texas. Sales taxes go up $200 million in a year, and they pat themselves on the back and say, boy, we're really doing it. But if your debt's increasing by $1.5 billion, you're not making a dent in it. But in the same venue, you have to understand, in Texas, we are not setting a pathway. We are doing exactly the same thing that the federal Congress is doing. Exactly. Make no mistake about it. This is a intrinsic relationship between the federal and the states all the way down through the municipalities. We have an issue, and it's core to our understanding of the Constitution and federalism. This Constitution, you're going to think y'all went to a first-year law school, so bear with me, I didn't go to law school. The Constitution of the United States created a government based in 3 principles: limited government, republicanism, and federalism. I do this because a lot of people don't have a clear understanding of these principles. You do not have to be a graduate. You do not have to be an academic, a scholar of any kind. You don't even have to have gone to college to understand these principles. But once you understand these principles, you're locked. There's nothing that can happen on the government level that you can't make a good judgment call on whether it's correct or incorrect. Limited government is interchangeable with liberty. It's really simple. The smaller the government, the more free the people, right?
Yeah.
Never been a government in history of mankind that ever got so large, everybody was so much more free. It just doesn't work that way. So that's a really easy principle. Republicanism, when the Constitution says it is supposed to protect our Republican form of government, republicanism is a really simple concept that we will be represented by those we elect. Because there's so many of us, you can't have direct democracy, we can't have everybody trying to vote on every single thing that goes on, so we elect people, right? If you go back, excuse me, if you go back to the origins of the Constitution and you see the original construct, everybody's read their Constitution. You remember the formula that they plugged in that said 30,000 citizens to the representative? That was a range. They wanted to keep it in that area. The reason for that was simple, and they labored over that, whether it's going to be 10,000, 30,000, 50,000. They settled on 30,000 being the marker. The issue was if you lived in a community of about 30,000 people or so, there was a pretty high likelihood you would know the person you were voting for personally, or at least know someone that knew that person personally. And guess what you'd have? You'd have something you do not have today: context of character. You have no context of character today. You get 2.5 minutes with them up here standing and talking to you about who they are. They wear a nice suit, they press your flesh, they leave the house. You get multi-million, in my case, you get $5 to $10 million spent to tell you how conservative they are, just like you. And you get it 45 times a day and you're inundated with it. And mass marketing works. That's all we get is a marketing schematic. You have no context of character. You do not know how they act at church, how they act at the school, how they act at their homes. You don't know anything about them. But we vote on that. Where are we at today? 720,000 plus of us to one representative? Who knows them? Lobbyists and special interests? When they leave here and go to the federal, when they're in the Beltway, who in Texas knows what they're doing? Nobody. This is an issue that actually goes back to the early 20th century. I'll tell you this real quick. You know how Texas, we know something about redistricting, right? Okay, well that's not new. In the beginnings of the Constitution, the original formula was that on growth of population through 10-year census or incoming states, they would make adjustments to the representation of the states. Well, around 1910, 12, 13, that wonderful era started, they were going to have a large influx of population. The sitting Congress at the time had 435. They decided, you know what, that's just a lot of us. We really don't need any more, so we're going to change the House rules. We're going to lock us in at 435. And in 1927 or 9, I can't remember, they passed an act that locked it in permanently. Fast forward to today, 700,000 plus of us to one of them. And there's no way you can get them out of office. There's just too many people that don't know who they are, and they just vote on name recognition. Now, so republicanism is kind of, it's waned. We're not really covered with representation either. Oh, by the way, the 30,001, think about this. This is a lot of scale we're going to talk about tonight. Scale. There's 26 million people in the Texas today, over 26 million. Put that in context. That's over 10 times, or right at 10 times as many people as when all 13 states when they ratified and implemented the Constitution. The framers who labored in Philadelphia and said 30,000 to 1, we've overshot that 5 times in Texas already. So think about this on a grander scale. That's what we're going to get to. Federalism. It's highlighted because it's the most important principle. It's absolutely the most important principle. That principle answers most of our problems. That principle is the states would hold the expansive power. Barring those few enumerated powers delegated to that new government, the states would retain everything else. That is not how it is anymore. When they left Philadelphia and they went to the state ratification debates, people like James Madison, who was a Federalist, by the way, this is more information than y'all need, but Federalists at the time were for big government. Anti-Federalists were for small government. Federalism is small government. They took names opposite for some reason, but that's a whole other subject matter. Anyway, James Madison, when they were going through the state ratification debates, they put out the Anti-Federalist and Federalist Papers. Everybody's heard of those. And he gave this description of the new Constitution. He said, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined, and those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. This is what it was sold as in the state ratification debates. This is why the states said, oh yeah, okay, we'll take a new government that's connecting all of us. Because you understand, they just got out of a revolution, a bloody revolution over a oppressive third party out there that they couldn't see, not represented. What we have today is an unconstitutional government, make no mistake about it, based in nationalism with unlimited powers. There is no federalism. It's nationalism. Nationalism is a cancer on a republic. And we're all eat up with the cancer, my grandmother would say. The issue is we've been nationalized. Conservatives. We don't get it. We don't look at things the way the framers did. We don't look at things the way the Constitution was originally constructed to do. We look at it under a national viewpoint. Nationalism is when all power is held by the central government with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. That would be like a Hamiltonian or a Lincolnian viewpoint. If I want to really upset a state representative and I've got them in the right spot, I'll say, hey, if you want to do the right thing, be honest with Texans, go to the state capitol and take the sign off that marble out front that says State Capitol of Texas and put the right sign up. And he says, what is that? And I said, branch office of the federal government, because that's all it is. Disagree? I mean, you're not going to get much plainer than me. I don't like playing any of the other stuff. This has got, you have to talk directly about it. You can't beat around these things. We're going too far down the left wing, so to speak. Nationalism is the killer. Now, if you don't understand what nationalism really is, you're going to. How did it happen? There is, you know what? I'm going to get something to read it to you. It's from a friend of mine who's an author, James Madison, The Making of America. He sent me something that you would find very interesting. How did it happen? Thomas Jefferson penned it. He said, the Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape in any form they so please. So, I'm telling you, we're going to take this with this discussion, and we're going to stop that coffee table talk where what happened to us? Well, how did we get off the tracks? Oh, the president. Oh, the Congress. Oh, we got away from God. Yes, we have gotten away from God. Who's helped do that? Supreme Court. Oh, no, we help it because we're nationalized. The Supreme Court is the kicker. They are the Mujahideen. They are the army in Egypt. We've got our own. We've got the Supreme Court. They are the muscle. Now, we can argue about presidents all day long, and you'd be right. But the fact is, presidents come and go. They're elected by us. The Congress, they're supposed to come and go. But many of them stay in there a very, very long time. That being said, they're elected by us. These are not elected. They're lifetime appointments. And they have basically done the exact opposite of what they're supposed to do. They are around today to legitimize unconstitutional and tyrannical behavior by the Congress of the President. They take power for the federal government at every opportunity. Do you believe the Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution protects you from the federal government? Yes?
Or,
Should.
true.
Do you believe the Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution protects you from your state government?
No.
It should? Okay. I'm gonna keep my eye on you. Don't throw things when I'm not looking at you.
It has since the 1920s.
Good call. Progressive era. The federal Bill of Rights absolutely never pertained to the states. It was never intended to be applied to the states. The first Congress never stated it that way. It was crystal clear. If you're saying, oh, I'm going to show you how we all got to this mentality. Now, all of us that are Second Amendment supporters, boy, I'm going to rub y'all wrong in a big way. To truly support the Constitution, federalism, republicanism, and limited government, you got to reject the idea that the Federal Bill of Rights was a limitation on the states. It absolutely was not. Was not. There are three things that are big weapons of the Supreme Court. Two of them you've heard of. Commerce Clause. Everybody's heard of the Commerce Clause. Original design of the Commerce Clause was to give a limited authority to that new general government to help keep commerce between the states regular, right?
Yeah.
Between the states. It was never intended for the general government to control or regulate all commerce inside a state. That said, there's nothing you look at, wear, sit on, drive, see, doesn't matter, that's not centrally planned, managed by the federal government in some way, shape, or form. Nothing. All of it is manipulated by the federal government. The second one is general welfare, which, my goodness, you remember when they, general welfare was never intended to be the general welfare of the individual. It was strictly a states-oriented aspect, and it was a general statement. It wasn't. Do you remember when, and he's your guy too, Kevin Brady?
Yeah.
Remember when he was touting the, I wish he was here. Remember when he was touting the, oh, we've changed the rules in the Congress, now you can't put a bill forth unless you give it a rider, right? It's got to have the right, it's got to show you where it goes where the Constitution allows it. I was at a town hall meeting, and that was early on, and I said, oh, really? Really? And he looked at me and I said, so we're just going to run off the copy machine for Commerce Clause, General Welfare, Commerce Clause, General. Commerce Clause can cover just about anything. I mean, the Supreme Court's already said if you don't participate in commerce, you're affecting commerce. So they can manage what you do, even if you're not participating. Very twisted viewpoint here. Anyway, that was a complete waste, and as you've seen, it's never restricted anything about the federal government going forward. They just grow as fast as they can. The third thing is this. Has anyone in the room, barring you, ever heard of the incorporation doctrine? I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to be shocked. This affects your life more than anything else on the planet. Every single time you sit down at a football game or a high school sports event or a meeting and you say a prayer and it crosses your mind, boy, we might get sued. Right? Why do you think incorporation doctrine is the reason why we have state representatives who consider themselves Christian, who go to our state capitol to do the business of Texans, who fight these battles over allowing abortion as a choice of birth control up to 5 months in the womb, and they think they've done something. It's this. Why do you think they fight over that? Because they'll get sued. They'll get sued by the federal government. Folks, we're so far down the pipe of nationalism, we're going to have to grab every single one of our representatives by the collar and straighten them out. You're going to know way more about what's going on in your state when you leave here than your own representatives. Hey, here, let me explain something. The incorporation doctrine is a 20th century creation by the Supreme Court. 20th century. Okay? What it is, in a very short story, they took the 14th Amendment from 1868. In the 20th century, they took the 14th Amendment, which gave newly freed slaves' rights of citizenship, and they said that the 14th Amendment gave them the power to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. If I walked up to you in the street and I said, hey, the Supreme Court in 1925 said that the 14th Amendment gave them the power to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states, you go, okay. Wouldn't mean anything to you. Except, we got to keep in mind, every state in the Union has a Bill of Rights. Right? And we have to keep in mind what the first Congress literally said, literally, as a group, what they said about the Federal Bill of Rights. Now, when I say they use the 14th Amendment, see, I'm working on you. I got the fire hose turned on, you're trying to catch it off. This is the first section of the 14th Amendment. This is the issue. This is their vehicle. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I put jurisdiction there because that word was used for Plyler v. Doe case in '82 for them to decide that we had to pay for the education of illegal aliens. Y'all remember that? Birthright citizenship, anchor babies, 1982. That hadn't been around forever. That was justified in this case using that terminology. Are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, yada, yada, yada. The privileges or immunities, life, liberty, or property, due process. Understand that the people that wrote the 14th Amendment debated it and agreed to it. Never extended more rights than were already existing. Due process, life, liberty, and property, these terminologies, they're already in the Constitution. You can find due process and life, liberty, and property in the Fifth Amendment. They took and expanded powers that they didn't have. All the 14th Amendment did was say that newly freed slaves have the existing same citizenship, rights of citizenship that we had at the time, and the relationship with the federal government was not to change. Now, understand, yes sir?
I have a question. How did they get past the "and" to get to jurisdiction?
Oh, you talking about on the
How did
aggravated
they
status?
get past the "and"? It said born, naturalized, and subject to the jurisdiction. To read it the way they've interpreted it would say or subject to the jurisdiction. How did they get past the "and"?
Well, to give you clarity on what we're talking about, if a couple from Germany, no, forget that, a couple from the United States flew into Germany and your wife was 6 months pregnant and they had a medical emergency and she delivered the baby in Germany. The parents are American, the child is born in Germany, whose jurisdiction does it fall under? Here. Parents are American, so it falls under that jurisdiction. When they wrote the 14th Amendment, they literally said, oh, by the way, this doesn't extend to Indians because they've got their own nation on the reservations. They answer their own. They have their own jurisdiction. What they said was, and I can't say it exactly, but I'll paraphrase it for you, they could not find any significant difference between those who came here illegally and those who came here legally. So it's a strange twist. I mean, they really did some mental gymnastics to twist that out of.
Well,
Basically, it had to do with you were born here. They said you're qualified, which is not anything close to the reasoning of the 14th. That was one of them. But this has been used to make a disaster out of our Constitution for 100 years now.
oh yeah, 14.
What incorporation does is it centralizes all government power, all of it. When you get up in the morning, do you worry about your state government oppressing you or do you worry about the federal government oppressing you? Exactly. It obliterated state sovereignty. There is no free and independent states. It rendered the Declaration of Independence completely meaningless. And it made we the people subject to the whims of a few elites in a town far, far away. Now I put that in there because if you've read one history book, you know the relevance of what was happening here 240 years ago. That being oppressed by someone you can't see and being at the whim of these elites in a town far, far away. Well, folks, we're in Texas. We should be able to manage our own affairs without worrying about a bureaucrat 1,200 miles away. Now, this is where it gets real simple and people go, wow, why didn't I see that before? When the first Congress met, does everybody understand when the Constitution was ratified in the states, it wasn't with fireworks. It barely ratified. It barely got out of the Philadelphia Convention. 55 showed up out of 70 that were invited. Only 39 signed off on the document. Of the ones that didn't sign off, by the way, people like George Mason and Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, thought it was a kiss of death. He was on his high horse in Virginia saying, do not sign off on this thing. It will be too large and too powerful. It will overcome the states. Boy, was he right. They said, if this is what you want, we'll help you take it through the process of state ratification debates on one condition. And that is if it ratifies, if the states accept it, the first order of business, when the first Congress comes together, they have to put further constraints on it. That's what they agreed to. Some states literally ratified it with an underwriting saying that it's got to have a Bill of Rights. It's got to have further restraints on it. So this is what they said. When the first Congress got together and they wrote the Bill of Rights, they had 12 that they offered the states. They sent out a preamble, the legal description of the document. And they said, the conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Its, not their own, just the federal. That further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. The last sentence is just as important because remember the mindset. We've got people who just came out of a bloody revolution. They're scared to death they're going to have a king or an oppressive government come over them again. So this is what they wrote. And as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. There's absolutely nothing in the Bill of Rights other than the fact that number one starts with Congress shall make no law, and the last one says anything not listed here belongs to the states or the people. Everything else, I mean, this restricts the federal government only. This is why I'm standing in front of you today. By the way, I started this about 10 years ago. I didn't go to school to learn this, and you wouldn't learn this in almost any school you go to. There's not a teacher teaching this anywhere. The Supreme Court upheld the understanding of the Bill of Rights as a restriction on the federal government only for over 135 years. They basically stuck to that. They weren't perfect, but they stuck to that. There was no incorporation. You're going to get three cases thrown out here, or three things thrown out here. One is before the 14th Amendment. This is Barron v. Baltimore. Real simple case. John Barron was a business owner on the wharf in Baltimore. During this period of time, the city council and the mayor decided to divert drainage from a road project in Baltimore to the wharf. During the project, it silted in, and the vessels that were doing business with Mr. Barron couldn't get to his dock. And he sued. And he was awarded like $4,500 or something in 1833. It's an incredible amount of money. Well, the appellate court overturned it. And he took it to the Supreme Court, and he tried to use the Fifth Amendment, which is supposed to stop you from having private property seized without proper
Due process of law.
compensation. Thank you very much. He tried to use the Federal Bill of Rights. This is what 1833 Supreme Court said. The Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of the individual states. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote that, and this was a very small excerpt of a very long dissertation saying that this is none of our business and it's a states' rights issue. Which is interesting. Anybody that knows anything about John Marshall knows that he really wasn't a fan of states' rights at all, and he actually hurt us a lot as time went along. But this was absolutely spot on. That's in 1833. Now remember, 1868 is the 14th Amendment. 1873, this is what we call slaughterhouse cases. The storyline behind that is, in New Orleans at that period in time, there were a number of meat processing plants and slaughterhouses working upstream of New Orleans. And for some reason, they had a really high incident of sickness and health issues. Maybe it had something to do with the carcasses and entrails that were coming down the river to the city. So the city and the state took it up and they went down south, got downstream of the city, they took some property, and they told all the slaughterhouses and butchers, if you're gonna do business, you have to do it here. And they didn't want to move. So they sued. And it turned into the slaughterhouse cases, and they took it to the Supreme Court, and they tried to use the 14th Amendment's due process, privilege of immunities, and equal protection clauses, which most of that is in the federal Constitution. Well, this is how that Supreme Court responded. They said the effect is to fetter and degrade the state governments by subjecting them to the control of Congress and the exercise of powers heretofore universally conceded to them of the most ordinary and fundamental character. What that says is, if we agree with what you're saying, we're going to give all the power that the state normally has to the Congress. We are convinced that no such results were intended by the Congress which proposed these amendments, nor by the legislatures of the states which ratified them. So what would happen today if a Supreme Court justice came out, I don't know, like today or yesterday when they were talking about same-sex marriage? You notice the one thing they don't say ever in any case is, we don't have any authority on the Constitution to review this case, therefore it's remanded to a state court and they're going to settle it. Never. They never give up anything, ever. That's a problem. Oh, and one other thing, we were talking earlier about the sign. This is Justice Miller. I don't know if anybody can see the dot. I think we're better going to know. Everywhere where it says state, in the Constitution as well, you know it's got a capital S? State with a capital S, as in state, Germany, Italy, Texas, right? Your own country. Lowercase s is more like a province or a county. You'll notice Justice Miller still refers to the states in the free and independent form. I'll show you how that changes in a second. This is after the 14th Amendment. They're still saying that the Federal Bill of Rights only applies to the federal government. This is the kicker. 1925. Gitlow v. New York. Everybody knows what the progressive era is, right? We're living in it. Okay, well, it started around 1910, and this was a culmination of getting our justices in order. Our progressive justices started getting a handle on everything. Gitlow v. New York. Mr. Gitlow was a socialist, a card-carrying socialist. He wrote, authored, printed all kinds of socialist diatribe, and he published it. And New York arrested him, and he was going to do time for it. And the court case progressed along until they pushed it up to the Supreme Court. And he tried to use the First Amendment in the Federal Bill of Rights, freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And the Supreme Court, who had held for 135 years that the Federal Bill of Rights only restricted the federal, this is how they answered. For present purposes, we may and do assume that the rights of freedom of speech and freedom of the press were among the fundamental personal rights and liberties protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment from impairment by the states, lowercase s. So, I'm going to tell you what that really means. If they were just old Texas judges, they just said, okay, well, no one back then ever really did this or agreed to this, but luckily for you, we're here, we're so much smarter than they are, and really smarter than you are. We're going to tell you what they really meant. And what they really meant was, the 14th Amendment gives us the power to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. So, that's what they meant. Justice Sanford, that's 1925. Now, in the beginning, it was known as selective incorporation. Because they only took freedom of speech, First Amendment. But over the years, we progressed, right? Got progressively larger and larger scale of power. Now it's just incorporation doctrine because they take everything. And invent stuff. I laugh here. Try and be a free and independent state, what happens? You get sued. Where do states go to lose? The Supreme Court. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a little positive right now. I've got a good feeling about Texas. I actually met a Supreme Court justice in Texas a couple of weeks ago. who totally gets it. He gets it. I'm not saying the whole body gets it, but this man gets it. And I won't tell you his name, because I don't want to affect him one way, shape, or form. I may want to run against Cornyn again. Let's use the Second Amendment for just a second. Everybody touts, now I'm an NRA member, a GOA member, and a CHL holder. And everybody loves to tout the Second Amendment. Second Amendment protects your right to have a gun. Well, here's the issue. Does anybody remember the case in Chicago about 12 years ago? It was just settled a couple of years ago. It was McDonald v. Chicago. Okay, for y'all that don't, you're totally going to get where I'm coming from. In Chicago, older black gentleman had a pistol. This was not a crime. This was not related to any kind of unlawful whatever. This man had a pistol he wanted to have in his home for security. Chicago had banned guns. So it went through the Illinois judiciary, made its way all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court. What do you think the Illinois Supreme Court said? I'll tell you. They said, man, we're sorry, Mr. McDonald, but the people of Chicago have spoken. They don't want guns. So you can't have a gun. So the NRA went crazy. Every gun lobby group in the country went nuts. All the conservatives who were nationalized said, oh, no, you can't do that. So it got out into the federal judiciary and it went to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, did the Supreme Court ever say no? No. They didn't say, oh, wait a minute, the first Congress said we're not to infringe on bearing of arms, infringe being the broadest possible term you can use. They didn't say that. They said, what, guns? Oh yeah, we'll look at that. Hand it to us. And then they ruled, I think it was in 12. And what do you think they said? They said, no, 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 no. The 14th Amendment gives us the authority to apply the Second Amendment onto the state, and it protects that man's right to bear arms. And the NRA clapped, and conservatives clapped, and everybody got up and said, Second Amendment, yeah! You know what it was if you said it in just plain speak? The Supreme Court said, oh, state of Illinois, you're not free and sovereign. What your people want doesn't matter. You do not have authority over your own affairs, and then what we say goes. And we are telling you that the Second Amendment in the limited, federally restricted Bill of Rights applies to you, and what you want doesn't count. So, why didn't anybody jump up and down? Because it worked for us. But where does politics go? Does it go left or right? Think about it. What we call moderate today, my grandparents would have called communism. I mean, it steadily moves left. And it's a historical cycle as well. I mean, I don't know how far we are on the back end of the decline, but we're in it. This is an issue in which the citizens of the state of Illinois should have managed their own affairs. But they don't. And we're so well indoctrinated after 100 years of this that we all get emotionally attached to these discussions being held in 50 different states. Not placing the name of God or Scripture or the Ten Commandments in a public building, make it a crime to burn Texas or U.S. flag, recognize marriage as one man and one woman, decide if pornography is not art, criminalize abortion as a choice of birth control, decide not to pay for the education of illegal aliens, manage the bearing of arms as they see fit, or require persons to show proof of citizenship. That's a state's rights. And that took me 30 seconds to jot those down. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Those are all issues that individual states should be able to manage on their own. So, what you get into is the mentality that we as conservatives are in today, which is the state of Connecticut is passing legislation to recognize Adam, Mary, and Steve, and we get emotionally, we get visceral about the whole thing. We're so ticked off. We can't let that happen. What? We have people that actually physically make phone calls, donate money, get all involved in that behavior. It's none of our business. In Texas, if we have the authority, and should have the authority, if we wanted to amend our Constitution to say one man and one woman It's a traditional construct of marriage. It's sticking in the Constitution we could, right? It's there, right?
Yeah,
Where is it today?
in flux.
It's in the federal judiciary. Take a wild guess where that's going to go. This is the issue we have. Nationalism has bitten all of us, myself included. We have 24-hour-a-day news cycles. We wake up in the morning, we flip on the TV, and it's politics. From the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed, we know more about our pundits than we do about our neighbors. We get up in the morning, we see, well, California's doing this, and we go, what? They can't be. What's wrong with them? The response needs to be, wow, I'm glad I don't live there. Treat it like they're doing this in Australia, or they're doing it's separate countries. It literally is. That's not terrorist speak. That's not extremist speak. It's the design of the construct of the republic. That's what we were supposed to be. So, we have to start unwinding this nationalist viewpoint that we've been taught every day, every generation for the last 5 generations have been just hammered with this, no, you're an American. No, I'm a Texan first. And I say it with pride, I am a Texan first. If my neighbors get invaded, let's go help them. But until that time, leave Texans alone to manage Texas. We'll leave you alone to manage your business. Now what happens today? Our state representatives, remember we're talking about abortion in Texas. Our state representatives go to the state capitol in Texas. Remember this clearly. Texans elect our representatives to go to our state capitol to work on the business of us. And we're going to start passing laws according to our morals, our values, and our traditions. And what happens? Buses show up at the Capitol. Where from? New York? Michigan? Loaded with people who are not Texan, who didn't vote on our representation, who do not represent our values and our morals. And they were allowed to go into the Capitol with their jars of feces and urine. That's what nationalism gets you. Now look, those of us in here who are imperfect Christians, which is probably the majority of us in there. In the Bible it tells us that we shall not be unequally yoked to non-believers, right? Okay. Nationalism forces you to be yoked to non-believers. It forces you. Now understand it's a two-way street. Non-believers are also forced to be yoked to us. So instead of us having a dialogue about our ideals and our morals and our principles, we don't have that today. What we have is a national viewpoint in a country of 316 million plus that is disseminated all the way down to a battle between right and left, liberal and conservative, whatever you want to call it. There is no debate. This is not a debate. What it is today is it is the right fighting the left to the death to try and get as many of our people in charge of the national government so that we can force as many of those other people to live according to our demands. And they want to do the exact same thing. But that's not how it was designed. But boy, are we taking it hook, line, and sinker. Nationalism absolutely creates tyranny. There is no other way around it. When you centralize all power into the hands of a few, their friends are going to do very well, and the people that they don't know are going to get smashed. And that's where we live. I'll go, I don't know if it was Locke called the government gun. He referred it to as the gun. The fact is, governments only have 2 features. Fear and force. There is no other feature to it. They can't be charitable, they can't be virtuous. The people that represent you, that make up the government, can use virtue. They can use their religion, their principles. But the government as a whole can't do that, because in order for a government to proactively do something to help you, it doesn't produce anything. It's got to get it from you to help you. So at a certain point, someone's getting oppressed as the government grows and grows and grows. And I think you've figured out over the last 100 years, the federal government specifically, and the state government's in the same hop now, if you graft it, they basically work together, both sides, to grow the government. to grow it. Grow the size and scope of the federal government, to grow the debt, at the expense of what? The states. Our liberty, our freedom, we're being enslaved every single day by debt. We owe more than we could ever possibly pay back. And they keep foisting it on us. And we keep saying, yeah, let's take it. We want limited government, but don't touch me. It's a vicious cycle we're in. We're feeding on ourselves. And we let this elite, talk about scale, there's over 316 million people across 50 different states. We're managed by 546 individuals. Scale that down. We're actually managed by 9 unelected individuals. Unelected, well-connected lawyers. Scale that down. We're actually all run by one swing vote on an unelected body. 316 million people in 50 different states, as in Germany, Italy, Portugal. Texas, by itself, is the 45th largest country in the world. We got plenty of smart people in Texas. We can manage our own affairs. I don't advocate for secession. I think the United States as a whole is better together. But what's happening today is that we've created so much animosity, and there's so much, you can call it hatred if you want to. People are so ticked off because principles don't align. If the people in Connecticut elect their representatives to go to their state capital and write laws that so much as recognize Adam, Mary, and Steve, we need to go, okay, we don't like it, but we've got to start getting our state representatives here to understand these principles and start pushing back correctly. Protecting natural rights and liberties is a responsibility of the citizens of each state, not the responsibility of a small group of political elites. How we manage our guns in Texas and our freedom to bear arms is our business. Do we have a Bill of Rights in Texas?
Yes.
Does it protect our right to have a gun?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what the last caveat in our statute is?
The wearing of arms.
In our own Constitution, it gives us, Texas reserves the right, I'm going to paraphrase, Texas reserves the right to legislate the wearing of those arms toward safety. What does that mean to you? That means if we keep electing phony, conservative, liberal representatives that wear a red t-shirt with a white R on the pocket just because they come to our meeting, when we know their history, we know what they're going to do in the future, and they keep going to the state capitol and they keep voting for the same growth of government and the same liberal practices, and they keep establishing more liberal judges, 20 years from now, we're going to wake up one day and we're going to have a judiciary in the state of Texas that goes, you know, guns are so unsafe. Not only can you not wear them, you can't have them. That's the direction we're going. By the way, that McDonald case in Chicago, when the Supreme Court ruled, no, he can have a gun. What'd your grandmother tell you when she said, anybody strong enough to give you something, strong enough to take it away, right? So what's going to happen 25 years from now when this progressive judges are even more progressive, because you know they will be, and they wake up one day and they go, you know, guns are so unsafe, we're just going to allow national legislation to ban guns. And our great-grandkids are going to go, you can't do that. And you're going to say, yeah, we can. Your great-grandparents gave us sanction. Yeah, the first Congress, we don't care nothing about what they said. Constitution, no, we took the power. They said it's okay. They were glad we did it. This is where we're at. This nationalism. When I put this on here, I do a lot of students, a lot of kids, college kids, and free market is always a code word. And I get a kick out of the whole term free market because generally older politicians don't have a clue what it really means. But they use it because they think it's a code word to help them get in tight with the younger folks. Federalism creates a free market for liberty. The fact is, none of the framers were talking free markets. But the way they designed the Union, the free and independent states, the way this thing was laid out, and the way they left the ability to manage our own affairs, even down to our own liberties and freedoms in the individual states, was because they knew that would give liberty maximum protection. Because under the original construct, if one state wrote laws that oppressed its citizens and took their liberty, what would they do? They would move. And where would they move? Probably the state with the most freedom. So the idea of federalism was to maintain freedom. Everybody wants to go, oh, states' rights. So you're saying states can do anything? Yes, basically. So they can enact slavery. No, that's the 13th Amendment, and they all agree to that. That's not part of the Bill of Rights. Oh, well, they can, they all automatically, they can go out there and they can say murder is okay. Yeah, I guess they could. Or they could go out there and say, we're going to have prayer in school. Every day we're going to have a moment for prayer in school. By the way, we're going to be pushing that this legislation, this next session. They could pass law that says we're not going to allow abortion as a choice of birth control in our state. It conflicts with our morals and our values. And allow another state to do whatever it's going to do. And those that align with our principles will move here. And those that live in Travis County will move out. I'm just kidding. I got some people I really care about there. But there's a lot that probably would move. This is what I want to hear our legislators say every time a microphone's stuck in their face. Unless it concerns the power delegated to the federal by the state, stay out of the business of Texas. And mean it. Literally mean it. When they get up and they start writing, because we elect them and they think their job is just to go create law. That blows me away too. I really would like to see somebody who gets elected on the basis of going and repealing as many laws as he possibly can. But you want a state representative or a state senator to go to the State House in Texas and to push serious, not sorta, kinda, I mean serious legislation that takes a stick and pokes it right in the cornea of the federal government. Yet we're going to have to do it. Because, by the way, is there anybody in this room that has a shred of doubt that the federal government will never, ever, ever make the decisions necessary to correct the path we're on? No. It's never going to happen. They're historical. They've got history of data behind. We've got empirical data to prove there's never going to be a simple majority in Washington, D.C. that make the decisions necessary. Any correction that comes is going to come from a state. End of story. And it's going to come from the first state that unwraps this nationalist viewpoint and starts speaking with clarity, truth to power to its citizens. Because this is going to be tough. Very tough. But it can happen. I believe this with all my heart. I think Texas can still be the salt and the light for the rest of the country. I think they can set the pace. The rest of the country, if you had people who were speaking it in correct terms, who understood federalism, the rest of the states would look very shocked and jaw dropped for a little while until they caught on. But once people grasp that we just want to manage our own affairs and we don't want to manage yours. Right? Tell the other states, why do you think I ran against John Cornyn? Because a U.S. Senator is the check on the federal government by the state. They only represent the state's best interest. And I read an article from him saying he was a representative of this nation. And he wasn't talking about Texas and the history of growing the debt and voting to increase the debt at every possible opportunity. You can't do that. And not say you're doing it for me or my children or future generations of Texans. This is the issue we're dealing with. We can absolutely reestablish federalism and states' rights here. We've got to find candidates on all levels. Y'all hear this day in and day out. I'm sure Julie gets up and espouses we've got to work on every single position, no matter whether it's school board or animal services. This is it. And federalism is the key. Y'all going to walk out here and go, I had no idea we were going to be talking about this. I'm telling you, incorporation doctrine, research it. Federalism, lost principle, the principle the founders tried to instill in us and protect for us. These people do exist. Find them. And if you can't find one, be one. I'm telling you. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, doesn't matter. Get up, get in the fray, and don't be afraid to say the right thing. Or the wrong thing, depending on the people you're standing in front of. It's that serious. I always end because God has blessed Texas for a very long time. And I want Him to continue to bless Texas. And I want us to stop talking about getting back to our whether if you're a Christian, you get back to your biblical principles, or if you're not and you want to get back to being free and get the government out of your hair and start doing things the way it was originally intended, we got to do this. I mean, there's no getting around it. I say keep Texas free. It's almost tongue-in-cheek because we're so controlled by the federal. I mean, I sit on a school board over here and
We want it free.
yeah, get Texas free, yeah. Now, keep Texas free is get off my estate. Y'all all got cards there. We've got to raise about 40 grand over the next 3 months because we take way more invitations than we can afford to travel to. If there's anything you'd be interested in supporting, part of this is going to be the fact that we're going to session in January, and we're going to be all over these state representatives about passing legislation that tells the federal government to stay home. I'm not anti-federal government, but during the session, I'm going to be anti-federal government. And they're going to, somebody, somewhere, is going to have to step up and put their name on some serious legislation that tells the federal government you're not coming to Texas and managing our affairs. We will. It's going to get different. I think we've got a number of representatives who are there now who might step up to take the challenge. A few. If y'all want to, I can tell you a few of the pieces of legislation we're pushing. One of them is not necessarily has anything to do with the federal government. One of them is rural communities are very supportive of it. Everybody's read the Constitution. Y'all all had y'all's talks about Article 5 conventions, right?
Yeah.
2/3 of the states request, 3/4 of the states have to
Liberty amendments.
approve. Okay. If we want to take the language of the 3/4 of the states to ratify, and we want to move it back into the state of Texas Constitution. In case y'all haven't noticed, we amend our Constitution a lot. Right? Okay, well, we want to amend it one more time. We want to amend it to change the amendment process and require 3/4 of the counties to approve before it ratifies. There's a reason for that. 5 counties in Texas manage the state. Tarrant, Dallas, Travis, Bear, Harris. If they want to amend the Constitution, they can do so. So as we get farther down the road, and the people that live in West Texas who have, well, I don't know, water wells or property rights issues, if we ever have some yahoo that wants to amend the Constitution to claim water rights on somebody's property, make it a little tougher for them. If all of Texas, if you gave the people in Gillette County as much stroke as you gave the people in Harris County, it would change the dynamic of what happened in the future in Texas. That's one of them. Another one is we're literally going to have a sponsor for having a moment of prayer in public school in Texas in the morning and going back that direction. Let them sue. There is no federal jurisdiction, and we are actually, these state representatives are interested because they say, well, how do you do it? Well, you have to literally write on the legislation that we do not recognize incorporation in the 14th Amendment's misuse as applying to federal Bill of Rights under the states, and go ahead and start that battle. Start it. Get it going. And, you know, it's a big deal. You're talking about 100 years of precedent. 100 years of precedent. You're talking about poking a stick in their eye and saying, we're not doing this anymore. Doesn't matter. It's got to happen. I don't think any one of us in this room can sit here and say we're on the right track. I don't even think we're on the tracks anymore. I'm not sure where we're at, but it's not on the tracks, and we're not going in any direction anybody wants to go. So, oh shoot, hang on just a second. Have any of y'all ever read a book or seen the book by Dr. Kevin Gutzman on James Madison, The Making of America? It's a very good book. Very good book. I've gotten to be friends with him over the last few years. Oh, did she really? All right, this is a little note he sent out here about a month ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago. It's right before July 4th. Just get context here. This was July 3rd. Kevin said, I just received the annual 4th of July email from the University of Virginia's president, Teresa A. Sullivan. That's the University of Virginia. That's Thomas Jefferson, University of Virginia. And it says in part, Thomas Jefferson established the University of Virginia to sustain and support the nation because he believed an educated citizenry would provide the only sure means of preserving the young republic. 2 years after UVA's founding, he wrote that the university would be an institution on which the fortunes of our country may depend. Now, this guy is probably the most renowned scholar on Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, the framers you could ever find, and this is what he said. He said, you know, someone needs to tell her that when Jefferson referred to our country here, he meant Virginia and not the USA, and that when he established UVA, he intended to sustain and support Virginia, not the nation. I wonder whether it's possible that she doesn't know this. She's the president of the university. That just kind of tells you how far down the path of nationalism we've hit. I mean, we're just so far down there. I thought I had a copy of all of the pieces that we're going to be doing, but I'm trying to think there was one other one that's significant. We're trying to get David Simpson to bring back up the TSA bill. Do y'all remember the TSA bill?
Oh, yeah.
We'd like to get him to bring that up in its original format. We'd like to, these are strictly picking at the federal. These are ones where it just reaches out there. We want to do away with Washington's birthday in the state of Texas, and we want to replace it with San Jacinto Day. Right? Which, by the way, if you've read much about George Washington, he would not have approved of that to start with, much less a temple made, an idol made to him in Washington, D.C. But these are the things we're going to be doing at this next legislative session. Between that and having someone really step out there and write legislation against abortion as a choice of birth control, period. Starting out, I mean, from square one. And make it known this is the target and this is what we're going to do. And tell the federal government that you want to enforce it, go ahead, try. Well, you know, that's in court. I'm not sure how they're going to go. It's in our Constitution. It's locked. Oh, you're talking about with the federal action? How did that rule before it got to them? In Texas, he kicked it, didn't he? He said it was unconstitutional. It kind of depends. This is how it all works. You either understand the dynamic or you agree with what we have today. We have state legislators who just agree with what we have today. And they think, like most attorneys who have been case method trained for the last 100 years, every year we've had a brand new crop of them, and they think and have been well trained to believe the Supreme Court's the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. So until you have a legislative body who goes, that's none of your business, it's our business, and this is what we're going to do, and they do it, see, without worrying about being sued. I asked, who was I was talking to, a representative, he said, well, how would you do that? And I said, well, for me, because it's not me, I can just throw this out there. I would put a caveat in my legislation that said, and anyone caught giving aid, information, or assistance to the federal government in the way of litigation about this legislation will go to jail. Because when we say we're not going to participate, we're not going to participate. That means in your courtroom either. And so that it all stops at the Red River for you. And they'll look at you, well, that's extreme. Yeah, look what they're doing to us. That's a little extreme. The way they're managing our affairs is pretty rough. Anyway, that's the whole context of this presentation coming at you pretty fast, because it's about an hour-and-a-half long presentation. And I tried to come at you with as much as I could in a limited amount of time. How did I do? How are we doing on time? Have any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, from what you said, it sounds like you probably aren't really in favor of a national constitutional convention, because that would be consolidating maybe more nationalism, allowing the Constitution, the national Constitution, then to supersede the state, whereas the state should just basically be saying, no, we aren't going to do what you and the Fed just said you were going to do, and, you know, bring it.
Yeah, and they couldn't. They couldn't. But an Article 5 convention, I actually, moderated an Article 5 forum in Dallas about 3 months ago. And they called me and said, you want to speak on behalf of an Article 5? No. You want to speak against it? No. Do you have an opinion? I'm neutral. You want to moderate? I said, sure. I understand both sides. I have a different viewpoint. I believe that if you're unwilling to use the mechanism that George Mason put in the Constitution to rein in an out-of-control tyrannical government, then you necessarily give sanction to the out-of-control tyrannical government you got today. So if you don't want to use it, that's your deal. But I also believe if you want to use one, by the time you got all the states that were needed to submit for one, they established a location, they got their delegations together, they actually met, they actually got enough membership to approve a proposal. By the way, they don't amend the Constitution at the convention, it's for proposals only. They only, say they approve something, then it really gets slow. It's got to go back to all 50 state legislatures to be ratified, and then the debates start there. So I think, personally, I think by the time you went through the entire process of trying to amend the Constitution, we would have failed by debt and economics way before then. And there's, I also have a little bit of an opinion about the whole aspect of amending the Constitution. The Constitution is a document, and it's as good as the people that execute it. So if you have principled, morally sound people who are executing the document, then you don't need additional amendments. So what I'm saying is, if we have a group of people for the last 150 years that don't follow those amendments, what's another amendment going to do? They'll just twist it around until they can do what Thomas Jefferson said. So, you know, if they want to do it, knock themselves out, give them something to do. I don't think we'll ever see the day where it actually functionally, practically went through the process. I just think that we're in a decline economically. Because for me, there's two parts. You have economics, which we don't have any control over. It's going to correct itself some way, shape, or form. And you have governance. We have control over governance. So my purpose in life, the way I stay positive, is I spread these principles as to everybody I can. Because when the light went on in my head 8 years ago, it doesn't go off. When you spread these ideas around, sooner or later, when that correction occurs, there's going to need to be people who understand those principles to help resurrect everything. So it's been interesting. It's been interesting. I can walk in a room with 300 or 400 people and say, how many people in here are ready for the Supreme Court to, you know, rule on guns or rule on that? And they're all conservative, they're all GOPers or whatever, and boy, yeah! And you go, yeah, somebody show me where they've got the authority to do that. Oh, well, that's the battle we fight with each other every day. We want that federal government doing what we want it to do. Well, no, you really want it doing nothing. You know, I don't even want it bombing anybody in Libya right now, or Syria. I want it to stop doing things without congressional approval. But we're so far off the track in the constitutional pathway, there's nothing going on there. Did you hear the guy, the FBI head today or yesterday said that the guys that they know these guys are fighting with rebels against U.S. causes in the Middle East? They're free to travel back and forth to the States.
And he said, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know things I don't know. Well, you sound like Rumsfeld.
Rumsfeld said the same
Yeah.
thing and got abused for it.
But I heard an interview with
danger.
Napolitano, Joseph Napolitano, and he said the problem lies in the fact that he literally has an issue with being able to declare treason on these individuals because it's in time of war in the Constitution, giving aid in time of war, and the Congress has never declared war. You have a big loophole going on. It's all.
Well, I don't declare war, because then he has to go to Congress.
Rosenberg, they were considered spies and traitors.
Oh, they got enough.
But that wasn't really time of war either.
They've got enough information on right now, enough cause to arrest them and hold them for trial. But he's making out like they can travel, we'll just watch them very close, they can travel at will. No, the minute they hit the ground here, you lock them up. I appreciate everybody coming out. I know it was the night out for everybody, but I'm glad y'all showed up.
Well,
Oh, thank you.
one thing,
That's a food for thought. Thank you very much, Dwayne, that was great.
Fire hose.